Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Tony Lupina, who's the owner of Lupina Financial Services. Tony, welcome to the program.
Welcome. Thank you very much, Mike.
Hey, I'm looking forward to talking to you because it's always neat to hear when someone has such vast experience in the industry. You've got over 35 years experience, so I want to learn from what some of the lessons and some of the strategies that you have worked with your clients on, but give us a little bit of background on what you've been doing in financial services for the last 30 plus years.
Sure, Mike. Actually, I started back out in 1983. In the mortgage industry and quickly went into full-time with real estate investment and working with investors along with obviously the commercial industrial side of it and land development. But I have always been helping people in regards to that area in regards to helping people financially acquire wealth through real estate. Then I moved out to Tennessee, and I actually changed course a little bit. Actually acquired my insurance license in life and health, and have been doing that now for a few years, and actually helping people, on their retirement side.
Yeah, it's like what you were mentioning here. It's like, it might be this product or this strategy or that strategy, but you've been working with people for many a year, helping them acquire and protect wealth. So, acquisition of wealth can be a lot of things. It could be, helping someone start a business, but in your case, it was real estate. And I think that without getting into the weeds of real estate but I know just enough to know the phrase 1031 exchange. I know that you can take one piece of property and do a kind of an exchange for the purpose of mitigating taxes. And so what I'd like to ask you is, with now your focus on wealth accumulation and protecting wealth, what are some of the ways that people can pass retirement savings on to their family while mitigating taxes? We all know that you cannot eliminate because you just have to pay taxes, but there's some strategies that you can take to help lessen or mitigate them as much as possible. How do you work with your clients in that respect?
Sure. It's simple, kind of a yet complicated question. So yeah, let me answer that in maybe two parts here. In 2017, Trump's Tax Act and Jobs Act was the largest overhaul of the tax code in 3 decades. It changed the then current limit of $5.49 million for a married couple to $11.7 million in the tax exempt limits of the estate upon death. For a single person, that current exemption is $5.49 million. But depending upon which state you live in, there are 11 states plus Washington, D.C. that collect an estate or inheritance tax. And there are 5 states, believe it or not, that collect both an estate and an inheritance tax. Now, that will all change come January 2026 when we go back to the 2017 tax tables. That meaning that the $11.7 million exemption will go back down to $5.49 million. The income taxes will also go up to the 2017 tax table rates at that time also. And one way we can minimize this is through life insurance. Having a large enough policy that will cover the tax liability so that the whole estate can be transferred to the beneficiaries without having to sell any asset. For example, let's say you go to your CPA or tax attorney now and estimate in the future with the 2026 tax laws in place and add in for inflation and add in maybe for asset growth and get a life insurance policy to cover the estimated tax liability on the last parent's passing. Let's say that was $500,000. In this case, you should probably have a policy or policies in place totaling at least that amount. And in most cases, the life insurance proceeds to the beneficiaries are tax exempt, and they do not count against your estate to assets. thus paying the tax liability and saving the estate assets to pass to the beneficiaries in whole. Federally speaking, the transfer is exempt subject to these limits. The second
that's a big part. I just want to pause right there and just say,
sure.
When you think about the old proverbial bucket of water with holes in it, you want to plug up as many holes as possible, because you start pouring water in it and the water flows right back out. So if the taxes that we want to minimize as much as possible, maybe you don't eliminate it all the way, but boy, the strategy you just laid out there with life insurance is almost like a gift, a legacy gift to your heirs, your family. And maybe later on in our conversation, we could talk about, just a couple of the broad strokes of the type of life insurance this would cover, because, there's term and there's permanent and whole life and all those different ones. But that's a really big piece to remember is when you pass when you can eliminate taxes that gets passed on to your family, that's a really big benefit to the estate.
Absolutely. And in many cases, this may only be one property, such as a farm. And if they didn't have the cash to pay the tax liability, they'd have to sell the farm or a portion of it as an asset that, they don't want to really do. So
because that asset could be growing down the road, and when death happens, the taxes have to get paid. So if it's not liquid, what are you going to do? And maybe you didn't want to sell that farm in that example, because maybe down the road that's cash producing and cash flow. So that's another big thing that people might not realize. You think, oh, here's the estate worth X. I've got to pay taxes of Y. I'll just pay it. Well, if it's not liquid, how are you going to pay it?
Exactly. That's exactly how it is.
Wow. Okay. So what's the second part?
The second part, let's look at inherited Iras. Many people believe they can pass qualified retirement funds to their children. That went away in the passing of the Secure Act in 2019. Now, monies that pass to the next generation in an IRA must be distributed within 10 years now. And if that IRA is substantial, that can create quite a significant tax impact to the beneficiary. So depending upon how that beneficiary is doing from an income standpoint, it could raise them to a higher tax bracket. Yeah. Funding a permanent life policy is one of those few assets that you can pass to the next generation free of income or capital tax.
And when you say permanent, we're talking about passing wealth to your heirs as a legacy after death. That's what most people think about life insurance as, is the actual death benefit. And these are some really powerful ways to consider it, is saving on taxes and passing wealth. But talk a little bit about the living benefit of having a permanent life insurance policy, because I think a lot of people think of life insurance as term life, and really that doesn't kick in until death happens. But with permanent, there's some living benefits that people might not be aware of.
Sure. There's a product we call the Index Universal Life Policy, which is a permanent life policy. It has three components of living benefits attached to it besides the death benefit and the cash accumulation benefit. First, it's a life insurance policy, and the death benefit is tax exempt to your beneficiaries. But imagine passing on a legacy, as you said, to your children, or passing on some to a charity of your choice.
Yeah.
Second, most of these what we call IUL policies, have a chronic, critical, and terminal illness riders built into them to help cover life-threatening circumstances that might occur while we age. Yeah. So, for instance, if one has a terminal illness diagnosis with, say, less than 24 months to live, he or she can access up to 100% of the current death benefit for any reason. So even if the cash value of the policy is less than the death benefit, the policy owner has the ability to access more cash.
Yeah.
And then the second one is the critical illness rider is in place for things like having a heart, stroke, cancer, liver disease, but in critical illness. So these occurrences allow the policy owner, again, to access funds up to 90% of the death benefit if desired. So they get another living benefit. And then the third one, well, let's just go with that one a little bit more. Let's say you come down with a cancerous tumor. And yes, your medical insurance will pay the medical cost of getting well, but people don't realize that they are now out of work for 3 or 4 months, and their spouse is working, and they can't stay home and take care of you. So now, not only do you have a loss of income in many cases, they also have to pay for daily care while the spouse works. And travel expenses and to specific hospitals and doctors also come into play, and that's an expense that obviously medical insurance doesn't cover. So then there's the chronic illness rider, which is available if the policy owner cannot perform 2 of the 6 daily functions of living. And most of these policies will allow up to 25% of the death benefit on a yearly basis if needed. Now, this doesn't necessarily take the place of long-term care policies, but can clearly supplement the care costs.
Yeah.
Now, these policies build up cash value also over time, and these funds can be used to supplement retirement income with no tax liability. So, an example, one receives, as he retires, let's say Social Security, and maybe funds from a 401k or 407b retirement fund, and maybe has some ordinary IRA account also to help supplement his retirement. Well, these are all taxable instruments, and with the unknown tax rates in the future, can reduce your income by 20 to 40%, depending on the then current tax tables. You know, today our taxes are actually at a 40-year low, believe it or not. And do you believe that our national debt, Congress will not raise taxes even more after 2026?
I do not believe that. I don't think many people would.
I don't think so. So imagine paying 40 to 50% on income taxes while in retirement.
Yeah.
You know, the government doesn't have a choice unless they cut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, or other government subsidies.
And we don't have that.
Our income dollars are maybe cut in half compared with today's dollar value. So if you're needing, let's say, $5,000 a month to live on, you're going to need to withdraw something like $7,200 or more to pay the taxes and live on the balance.
Right.
But then with inflation, that amount will go up even more to break even with the cost of living.
Yep.
So, you know, you're also not likely to have the same deductions when you retire as when you were younger, paying off a house and other deductions while working. So this tax-free funds from the IUL policy can actually help keep taxes down substantially and keep more money in your pocket to live on, extending your dollars for the future. So this permanent life policy has 2 main components, obviously, is the death benefit and the cash value component, along with the 3 riders I just mentioned.
Yeah, and I think so many people feel or understand life insurance as the death benefit. So we've covered that, and the riders can give living benefits if some chronic or critical illness sets in. But now I want to kind of take another step back further and go, okay, let's talk about some more living benefits, even if catastrophic things don't happen. So let's say you're not out of work. Let's say you don't have that critical illness. Talk a little bit about accessing the cash value without triggering taxes so that you can use it for many things like college tuition or even just supplementing your income. Because that's a feature that I think a lot of people just don't realize exists.
Well, exactly. Any permanent life insurance product will accumulate some kind of cash value. Some are different than others, and the one I mentioned was the IUL, or the Index Universal Life Insurance Policy, and they're tied to an index. You don't lose money when the market goes down. You will break even. They have a floor with some actually pay you up to 1% even when the market's down. With this, they also have a cap, so some of these are tied to can't go any higher than maybe 13%. Some are up to 15% of the market, but you can't lose principal. So
that's huge.
When you get to a point, it's your own bank account. Okay, so let's say come college tuition. We talk about this. That obviously you can get a 529 plan, or there's what we call a Coverdell Education Savings Plan. You can have these and fund these for your children, anticipating college tuition. But if you don't use all of that money that you're funding, the remainder is going to be taxed or penalized.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, in reverse, you're going to get taxed for not using it. Whereas the cash value in your life insurance policy, if you fund it properly, you're going to have access to money to help pay for that college tuition. Let's say buy a car without having to pay a loan interest and rate to the bank. Or in many cases, what we like to do is, to supplement retirement, which again helps reduce the taxes in the future. So the upside is it's you can build it up as much as you want almost, and it's tax free.
I think that one thing that I want to point out about what you just said there is you cannot lose money, and a lot of people think like, oh, I put my money with this financial planner and the market dropped and we lost all kinds of money. With this type of product, permanent life insurance, you can't lose money. Wow, that's pretty amazing. Maybe the upside is capped a little bit. Maybe if the indexes, went through the roof, maybe you're going to be capped at whatever the percentage, but the downside risk is eliminated. And to me, I think when people hear that, that's a really big comfort, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's just like, for instance, right now, I believe the current market that we're in, we're losing close to 17% from the top of the S&P. That affects your 401k and your retirement plans with your company. Mm-hmm. How do you make that up? It's the market has to turn around and probably perform somewhere in the neighborhood of 22 to 25% just to break even.
Yep. Yeah.
So these actually outperform the market because they break even, they don't go down, and then when the market does go up, it goes up accordingly, but it may not take a 20% profit, but there's nothing wrong with taking 15%.
Yep.
As long as you're not losing money. So
exactly.
on the average, you're ahead of the game.
And with this type of tax-free growth and the ability to access money for any purpose without paying, loan payments and interest and all that, it sounds to me like this is one of the kind of insider vehicles that the elite of the rich, pay so little in taxes, right? I mean, a lot of people don't really know this exists, and you can't really go out and Google, set up this thing that Tony just told me about. So you got to know how to do it right. You got to know how to set up the right limits and floors and ceilings and riders and all these things to make sure that it's going to perform the way you need it to. So it's not just check the box and send it over to me. You've got to have someone that guides you through the process. But once it's set up the right way, boy, it sure sounds like this is how those elite, rich pay so little in taxes, right?
That is true. You need to speak to somebody who's a financial advisor or maybe your CPA when you set these up, so we don't get into what we call a MEC, MEC. That's basically, where the cash value exceeds the limit to where the product is no longer an insurance product at all, mm-hmm. Life insurance. So it's not hard to keep on the limits. It's you have to go to an extreme to really kind of break that rule. But you want somebody who knows what they're doing and they're able to say, hey, you can fund this up to, let's say, $5,000, $10,000 a year, depending upon the life insurance amount that you're getting on the policy, and you can fund this for X amount of years with this amount without breaking the MEC rule, so that it still stays as a tax-free instrument.
And even if you did approach those limits, couldn't you just set up another contract and have a couple, three going at the same time?
Absolutely. You can have as many of these as possible that you want. In fact, these are actually these are perfect products for children to start when they're young. Most parents start a savings account for their children. They add maybe $50 to $100 a month, right? Thinking, okay, well, this is they're going to be their account, savings account. Maybe it's going to be their tuition, college tuition account. And you can set these up, and again, it grows and grows and grows, and they have the benefit of, one, maybe never ever needing another life insurance policy, and two, having these other riders that beneficial for health, critical, and chronic illnesses, and along with accumulating tax deferred money.
And to me, I think there's a lot of learning nuggets that we've talked about here. And one thing that pops into my mind is, okay, where's the shoe going to drop? Where's the problem, the fly in the ointment? But if I'm correct in understanding this, I've heard out there, so correct me if I'm wrong, using insurance policies like this, the permanent kind, has been around for hundreds of years, and even our banks that we put our money in, they take our money and they'll put, they want to find the safest place to put their money because they have to give your money back when you need it out of your savings account and whatnot. But even banks use these instruments, right?
Absolutely. And interesting how you say how historically this has been around for years. Yes, I mean, it's been around for, decades. And if you look at the ledgers of most banks, they actually have, and you'll see it right on their ledger and their financial ledgers, life insurance.
Yeah.
And, they're investing in it for the same purpose as other corporations also, do this. But it's funny that, when we say something that, it's been around for years. Well, did you know that Walt Disney used his permanent life insurance to fund his development of Walt Disney in Los Angeles, in Anaheim?
Interesting.
In 1950, he had the land, but he didn't have enough equity, and the banks would not lend him money to go forward. So he pulled together, he had several policies, and he had enough to create enough equity to where the banks actually lent him the money to start Disneyland.
So then if that's the case, then it acted like an asset if it was collateral.
Absolutely. Wow. Again, well, look at, I don't know if you know Foster Farms. They started out by buying 80 acres back in Modesto, California, taking out from the cash value of life insurance policies. And that's how they bought the 80 acres, and that's how they started.
Interesting.
And even back in the early 1900s, J.C. Penney, they started out, gentleman had bought one store, created it, and he's expanding. And then the Depression hit, and he kind of got in trouble with trying to, keep his payroll going. But he had policies and enough cash value that he borrowed against to pay his payroll and keep going. And of course, what happened to that company grew and grew and grew. There's many examples of that through history that people just went back and said, hey, I had my own bank account, and it was through life insurance, cash accumulation.
Yeah. Well, Tony, it's been really interesting to learn some of these perspectives. If someone is interested in seeing how they could potentially take advantage of these, what's the best way that they could reach out and connect with you?
Well, my direct line, area code 615-801-3113. And actually, by email, it's pretty simple. My last name, Lupina, Lupina, insurance @gmail.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Tony. It was a real pleasure talking with you.
Oh, thanks, Mike. I appreciate the opportunity.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.